They built their dream house 6 inches onto my land, and those 6 inches ended up costing them over $100,000. No exaggeration, no tiny print math tricks. Just the kind of bill that shows up when you decide the rules are optional and your neighbor is supposed to be understanding. And before anybody calls me petty, let me say this up front. If it was 6 inches of grass I could mow over, sure. Maybe I'd shrug, but it wasn't grass. It was concrete. Permanent. On my property. And once you let someone pour concrete on your boundaries, you're basically telling the world your lines don't mean much. My name's Daniel Harper, and I own a narrow, weird little 5-acre strip just outside a place called Mill Creek Hollow, about an hour from Nashville. It's not some billionaire spread with horses and a stone gate and a drone-shot sunset. It's long and skinny, road to creek, oak trees, cedar brush, red clay that stains your boots, and a gravel drive that crunches under your tires in a way that feels like home whether you're in a good mood or not. My dad bought it in 1987, back when this whole stretch of county road was basically scrub woods, a couple cattle fences, and a gas station that shut down at sunset like it had a bedtime. He paid $48,000 for it and thought he was getting robbed. He used to say that like it was a joke, but it wasn't really a joke, just Dad doing that thing where he complained as a love language. When he passed, the land came to me. I never built anything fancy. Just a modest cabin I slowly fixed up over the years, and a workshop out back where I mess around with old engines, the kind of projects that start with "this'll take one afternoon," and end with you swearing at a bolt 3 weekends later. Out here, property lines aren't vibes. They're religion. The boundaries are marked with iron survey stakes, real ones, driven deep by somebody who knew what he was doing. Everything's recorded at the county office. Clean title, clear lines. Sacred stuff in rural Tennessee. And for a long time I didn't even have neighbors. The parcel next to mine sat empty. 5 acres of trees and weeds and deer wandering through like they paid rent. I liked it that way, quiet, private, predictable. Then the city found us. The couple who bought the lot next door were Evan and Claire Reynolds, early 30s, remote tech workers out of Portland, the kind of people who say things like, "We're moving for our nervous systems." They rolled in one Saturday in a shiny black SUV that looked like it had never touched gravel in its life. Claire had one of those wide-brim hats you see in home decor magazines, and Evan wore boots so fresh they still had that new store smell, like leather and optimism. They introduced themselves right away. "Hey neighbor," Evan said, smiling big, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. "We're building our forever home." Claire jumped in, bright-eyed. "We've been dreaming about this for years, fresh air, slow living. We just want space." And I nodded, because I'm not allergic to dreams. I just know dreams get expensive when they don't respect reality. Within a month, the trees started coming down. Big equipment rolled in, dozers, excavators, concrete trucks. Backup alarms all day long, that high-pitched beep 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 that drills straight into the part of your skull that wants quiet. Guys yelling measurements. Nail guns popping like fireworks. Dust hanging in the air. The whole place smelled like fresh-cut timber and diesel. They hired an architect out of Atlanta, and their contractor, Marty, drove a lifted truck with his company logo plastered on both doors like he was running for office. Every night, Claire posted about it online. I know because my sister sent me a link, laughing. "Danny," she said, "your neighbors are influencers." Apparently Claire had a growing Instagram account documenting their rural reset. She filmed the clearing, the trenches, the first concrete pour like it was a nature documentary. She'd stand by the foundation trench holding a coffee mug and say things like, "We're so grateful to steward this beautiful property." That word, steward, stuck with me, because it's a fancy way to say we're in charge now, and sometimes people start acting like they're in charge of things that aren't theirs. One afternoon, I did what I always do every couple weeks, walked the edge of my property. Not because I'm paranoid, just because it's habit. Land's like a fence or a dog. You check on it, you make sure it's where you left it. And that's when I noticed their concrete forms looked close. Not, "Oh, neat close." Not, "Wow, that's a big house close." Close, close. My stomach tightened before my brain could catch up, and I walked straight to the iron stake at the boundary corner. Rusted, ugly, solid. Still planted like an anchor. Then I looked at the corner of their foundation. It was over the line. Not by feet. Not by yards. By about 6 inches. 6 inches of gray concrete crossing past that invisible line that separated mine from theirs. And I swear, I stood there staring at it like it had personally insulted my dad. Because here's the thing, 6 inches doesn't sound like a lot. You can lose 6 inches in a bad haircut. You can gain 6 inches if your boots are thick enough. But land isn't measured by feelings. It's measured by lines. And those lines matter because the second they don't, somebody decides your no is negotiable. So I walked over to Evan. He was near the portable toilet with blueprints in his hand, looking busy in that way people look busy when they want you to leave them alone. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Got a minute?" He smiled like we were about to talk barbecue. "Sure thing, Daniel. What's up?" I pointed back toward the corner. "Your foundation crossed the property line about 6 inches onto my side." He blinked at me like I'd said his SUV was floating. "That can't be right," he said immediately, already pulling his phone out. "We checked everything." He opened some property app, satellite view, colored lines, the kind of thing people trust because it looks official. "See," he said, pinching to zoom. "We're good. Line's right there." I looked at the screen, then back at the actual iron stake in the dirt. "Those apps can be off by 10, 15 feet, I said. "They're not survey grade." He chuckled, like I was a cute old man talking about horses. "Man, those old stakes shift all the time. Frost, rain, who knows?" "Did you get a licensed survey done?" I asked. He hesitated, just enough. "We had the lot lines from county records." "That's not the same thing." He sighed like I was ruining his Saturday. "Look, we already poured. Even if it's a few inches, it's not hurting anything." Not hurting anything. And something in me shifted right there. Not full anger yet, more like a warning bell. The kind that goes off in your chest when you realize you're not having the same conversation the other person thinks you're having. "It's my land," I said, quieter than before. 6 inches or 6 feet. He gave me that tight smile again. "Let me talk to the contractor. I'm sure it's fine." And then construction didn't stop. The forms came off. The framing went up. That 6 inches of concrete sat there hardening into something permanent. A week later, I went to the county office myself, got copies of both recorded surveys, mine and theirs, folded them under my arm, and walked back over there trying, honestly, to keep this neighborly. I still wanted that small-town moment where two adults look at a piece of paper, nod, and fix it before it turns ugly. Evan was standing on the framed subfloor talking to Marty, and Claire was near the driveway filming again, narrating into her phone about reclaimed wood and intentional design. "Evan," I called. He climbed down, brushing sawdust off his jeans. "Hey, Daniel. Everything good?" I handed him the surveys. "These are the recorded surveys from the county office. Yours and mine. That iron stake hasn't moved. Your footing crossed the line." He barely glanced before handing them back like they were coupons. "We're way too far into this to start second-guessing everything." "It's not second-guessing," I said. "It's a boundary." He exhaled slowly, like I was a difficult customer. "Okay, let's be practical. What do you want to do here?" "I want you to move it," I said. "Or tear that section out and repower it inside your line." Marty laughed under his breath, just a little, but loud enough. Evan shook his head. "That would cost a fortune. We're already framed. We'd have to redesign the whole corner." I said, "That's not my problem." And Evan looked at me like he was recalibrating his opinion of me, like, "Oh, you're not going to be easy." Then his tone turned transactional. "What if we just adjust the line?" he said. "We can do a boundary amendment. Shift it 6 inches. I'll cover fees and give you, I don't know, $1,000 for the trouble." $1,000? For a piece of land my father bought before Evan was probably out of middle school. "It's not for sale," I said. "It's 6 inches, he shot back, patience thinning. "You'd never even notice it." "I notice it," I said. "And it's not about the inches. It's about you pouring concrete on land that isn't yours." Claire wandered closer, phone lowered but still recording like she was collecting content for later. "We're not trying to take anything from you," she said, soft, almost wounded. "We just want to build our home. We thought everything was right." "You thought," I said, "but you didn't verify." Evan's jaw tightened. "So you're really going to make us tear down part of our house over this?" I stared at him, and I remember thinking, "You're acting like I did this to you." "I'm asking you to fix what you built on my property," I said. He stepped closer, voice dropping like a threat dressed up as advice. "You're being unreasonable." That word, unreasonable, hung in the air like humidity before a storm. I left without yelling, without slamming anything. Just walked back across my gravel drive with my chest tight and my head loud. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying it, and I'll admit, part of me wondered if I should let it go. 6 inches wasn't going to change how I used my land. I wasn't planning to build right along that line. But boundaries are weird like that. If you let one slide because it's small, you teach people your limits are flexible. And I'd learned the hard way. People will keep inching until you don't recognize your own life anymore. A week passed. More framing. Windows delivered. Still no correction. So I called a lawyer. Her name was Margaret Collins, late 50s, sharp as broken glass, the kind of attorney who doesn't waste words or pretend to be your therapist. Her office downtown was lined with property law books that looked like they'd been opened 1,000 times. Start from the beginning, she said. I laid it out, the stake, the app, the offer, the refusal. She leaned back. Did you give written notice? Not yet. Good. We do that. Within a week, she sent a formal letter. Cease construction immediately and remedy the encroachment. Facts. Consequences. No emotion. Construction didn't stop. Instead, I got a response from their attorney, Thomas Avery, Nashville, polished, the kind of guy whose shoes always look expensive. His letter said the encroachment was minimal, caused no material harm, and forcing demolition at this stage would be, his word, unconscionable. Margaret read it out loud and smiled without humor. They poured first, she said, and asked questions later. That's not unconscionable. That's negligent. Their counteroffer was $5,000 for a permanent easement, legal permission for the corner of their house to sit on my land forever. 5,000. Margaret looked at me. If you accept this, it's done. You'll never get that piece back. And I sat there staring at the ceiling, feeling that weird mix of anger and sadness you get when you realize somebody's betting you won't have the spine to fight. So we sued. And that's when things got strange, because while we were filing motions, gathering documents, paying hourly fees that made my eye twitch, Evan and Claire were finishing their dream home like nothing was happening. Siding went up. Landscaping started. A wraparound porch appeared. String lights hung between cedar posts like a wedding venue. Claire posted a full house tour titled something like From City Chaos to Country Peace, talking about community, respect for the land, gratitude, while the corner of her house was literally sitting on my property. Meanwhile, every time I walked past that corner, it felt like it was leaning into my yard on purpose. About 4 months into the lawsuit, Evan came over again, no contractor swagger this time. He looked tired, less shiny. This is getting out of hand, he said. You could have stopped it before the concrete dried, I said. He rubbed his face. We've sunk almost $800,000 into this house. Our lender's nervous. This lawsuit is scaring people. I warned you. It's 6 inches, Daniel. And it's my 6 inches. He looked at me like he couldn't decide whether I was stubborn or insane. What do you actually want? He asked. And I remember answering slowly, because I needed him to hear it. I want you to understand you don't get to build first and negotiate later. He shook his head. You're going to burn goodwill in this town over this. That almost made me laugh. Goodwill doesn't come from surrendering your property. Goodwill comes from people respecting you enough not to test you. He left, and the case dragged on, depositions, surveyors, paperwork. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. During discovery, Margaret got copies of their closing documents, what they relied on when they bought the land. And buried in the stack was a cheap survey substitute sketch, not a real licensed survey, and an email thread where their contractor had warned them early on that the stakes might not match the app lines, that they should confirm with a proper survey before pouring. Marty had literally told them in writing to double-check, and they poured anyway. When Margaret slid that printout across her desk to me, my stomach dropped, not because I felt guilty, but because I realized this wasn't an accident anymore. This was a choice. They didn't just miss the line. They gambled that 6 inches wouldn't matter, and if it did, they could pay it away later. A licensed survey confirmed exactly what I'd said from day one, 6 inches over, clear as daylight. By the time the court date rolled around, I wasn't even thinking about dirt anymore. I was thinking about consequences, whether they still exist when you have enough money to assume they don't apply to you. Hearing day came gray and cold. Fluorescent lights. Wood paneling. No movie drama. Just a judge who looked like he'd seen every version of this story. Judge Holbrook, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, quiet voice that didn't need to raise itself to fill a room. Margaret laid it out clean. Timeline notice, continued construction, survey confirmation, deliberate disregard. Thomas Avery argued hardship, equity, fairness, community impact, how much Evan and Claire had invested, how demolition would be financially devastating. At one point he said, "Your Honor, This is a minor encroachment, 6 inches. It causes no functional interference to Mr. Harper's use of his land. And the judge scribbled something on his pad, calm as a man writing a grocery list. When Margaret rebutted, she didn't shout. She just said, "The size is irrelevant when the decision to ignore notice was deliberate." That word, deliberate, hit harder than unconscionable ever did. Then Judge Holbrook looked directly at Evan. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, steady, "when were you first informed of the boundary concern?" Evan swallowed. "Before the slab was fully cured." "And you continued construction?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" Evan hesitated. And for a second, just a second, I almost felt bad for him, like watching somebody realize the stove is hot after they've already put their hand on it. "We believed it was minor," he said, "and could be resolved later." The judge nodded once. "Resolved later by whom?" No answer. A week later, Margaret called me while I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring out at the tree line. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. "The court found the encroachment was willful negligence. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding. Willful negligence because they were warned and chose to proceed." Then the judge laid out 2 options. Option 1. Pay $75,000 in damages to purchase a permanent easement for the encroached area, plus all of my legal fees. Option 2. Enter into a mandatory annual easement agreement, $20,500 per year, adjusted for inflation in perpetuity. In perpetuity. Margaret paused like she wanted that phrase to sink into my bones. "And your legal fees," she added, "are just over $18,000. I didn't cheer. I didn't fist pump. I just sat there feeling tired. Like the kind of tired you get when you've been holding a door shut for months and the pressure finally releases. Evan tried to negotiate after that, of course. Motions filed. Arguments about valuation, about punishment, about market value. Judge Holbrook didn't budge. In his response, he wrote that they elected to assume the risk when they proceeded after notice, and the consequences were not punitive. They were the natural result of that choice. A few weeks later, Evan came to my door. No contractor, no lawyer, just him, shoulders slumped like a man walking into a dentist appointment he can't cancel. "We're taking the lump sum," he said quietly. 75 plus fees. I nodded. "I never thought it would go this way," he said. "You could have fixed it when it was wet concrete," I replied. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Claire says you ruined the story." "The Instagram story?" I asked. He didn't answer, which told me everything. "We thought you'd work with us," he said finally. "I did," I said. "You just didn't like the terms." There was this long pause, no anger left, just heaviness. Then he asked, sudden and weirdly vulnerable, "Do you hate us?" That caught me off guard. "No," I said honestly. "I don't. But I won't be ignored on my own land." He nodded once and walked back across the gravel. They wired the money within 30 days, 75,000, 18,000 in legal fees, plus a new survey, updated documentation recording fees. By the time everything settled, the total was just over $103,000. All because of 6 inches. And the funny part? I didn't feel richer. The land didn't look different. That corner of their house still sits where it sits. Only now it's legal, stamped, filed, permanent. Claire stopped posting as much. When she does, the captions are less poetic, more guarded. We nod when we pass on the road. That's about it. Sometimes I walk out to that iron stake and rest my boot against it, just to remind myself it's still there, still where it's always been. And that's the part people don't understand when they say, "Why didn't you just compromise?" Because compromise is something you do when both people show up in good faith. This wasn't compromise. This was someone crossing a line, being warned, and deciding the line would move because it was convenient. And here's the lesson I didn't learn young enough. Power doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like a smile and a shrug in the sentence. It's not a big deal. Sometimes it's someone asking you to swallow something small today because they're counting on you swallowing something bigger tomorrow. So I'll ask you what I still hear people argue about in town. If someone builds on your land after you warn them, and then tells you it's too expensive to fix, whose responsibility is that? The person who crossed the line, or the person who refuses to erase it? Was I defending what was mine, or did I let pride turn 6 inches into a war? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, I read more of them than you'd think. And if you've ever had a neighbor, an HOA, a contractor, or anybody with a confident smile try to adjust your boundaries, tell your story too, because I'm curious. Where do you draw the line when being nice starts turning into being used?